So Steve should be coming up pretty shortly to introduce you.
No worries.
Awesome. I'm Adam.
I'm Jeff.
Jeff, thanks so much for coming. Awesome. Yes, every week we just try to keep getting more people out. And it's kind of exciting just to kind of connect on what's similar to people.
Right.
Which I think it's like kind of cool to have a church that's different.
Yeah. Well, cannabis has changed the direction of my life in every area. If you would have told me even a year and a half ago that I was living in Colorado and International Church of Cananbis speaking, I was here. Yeah. So, yeah.
Give me a second.
Kind of at the same time.
Actually, Steve, let me get focus on it. Is it too blinding or is it alright? Yeah, this thing. It's a little blinding. Well, you tell me if you want me to turn it on. Because it doesn't. It looks a little cooler, but it's not like night and day. Oh, cool. All right. I think it looks cool. Give me 1 second. Dude, look at
Check, 1, 2, check. Check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. 4, 2, 0, check, 4, 2, 0. Welcome everybody, welcome to Friday evening services at the International Church of Cananbis. Thank you all for coming out. Woo! As many of you know, I haven't been in town the past couple of weeks. I had to go back home to Miami to help my family deal with post-Hurricane Irma. For those of you that don't know, if you go to Miami right now, it looks like a hurricane hit yesterday. And a hurricane didn't even hit Miami. So I can't even imagine the devastation and destruction that's happened in Puerto Rico. If you have the ability to help out and donate to the victims of all the hurricanes that have happened from Texas to Miami to Puerto Rico, please do so. If you want to ask me about which organizations are the best to donate to, please come up to me afterwards and I'll let you know. I just got back a few hours ago. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to see some familiar faces. We have a really special evening tonight. As many of you know, we normally have a guest speaker and a musical guest every week, and then afterwards we have a big potluck barbecue. Tonight's going to be a little bit different. We have an amazing award-winning documentary produced by a good friend of mine, Adam Scorgi. It's called The Culture High, and it has Joe Rogan, it has Snoop Dogg, it's got some great guests in it, made by some guys in Canada that are amazing filmmakers. We also have a great speaker tonight, Jeff Waters. So we're really excited about tonight. Happy you guys made it out. If anybody wants to light from our sacred candle, please come up here, light your joint, hand it to me. Let me take a hit, and go back. Couple quick updates before I bring on Jeff. Many of you know we've been fighting the city regarding us being able to congregate here and do what we do. We were supposed to have a hearing, it ended up getting delayed. So now we have a new trial date. It's November 8th. But in reality, we're going to know before November 8th whether or not we're going to be able to use religion as defense against the Colorado Clean Air Act. For those of you that don't know, we got 2 citations on our opening day. And one of the citations was for consumption of marijuana in a public space, which means that we were supposedly consuming on 420, and 420 was technically a public event. The city's not going to be able to prove that because we didn't do it, and it wasn't a public event. It was a private event, and neither of us were accused of doing this. Actually smoked that day. We were doing media interviews all day, so that charge we're pretty sure is going to get dropped. The one that's equally as important, if not more important, is the Colorado Clean Air Act, which, for those of you that don't know, was a law that was passed in 2006 in the state of Colorado to protect employees of cigar lounges and bars from being in a carcinogenic secondhand smoke environment. Marijuana was later added to the Colorado Clean Air Act, even though there's no evidence that secondhand marijuana smoke causes nearly the same damage as cigarettes or cigars. But there is something called the Constitution in this country, and we have a constitutional right to freedom of religion. And so there's no state law that can be enforced in a private venue, in a private church, that will supersede our constitutional right to practice our religion here. So we're hoping that a judge sees it the same way as we do. If it doesn't go our way, we're not exactly sure about our survival, because technically they could come back and fine us over and over again until we're completely out of business. So it is an important day. We will keep you all posted if you can help us. If you can help by showing support, by physically being there, by holding signs, etc. We're not exactly sure how it's all going to go down, but rest assured, we will send an email if we need our congregation's support. November 3rd is our hearing for the brief that we filed, which means that the judge is going to rule on whether or not we're allowed to use religion as a defense for the Colorado Clean Air Act. And November 8th is our scheduled trial. If it ends up going to trial, then yes, we would love to have you guys come out in numbers and help support us. So we'll keep you updated there. Anybody have any questions on any announcements? Oh, I have a couple of other announcements. Our Halloween party that we were planning on doing with one of our sponsors, well, our sponsor backed out. And unfortunately, to throw a Halloween party, we need to have a little bit of money. And so it looks like we're not going to be having a Halloween party this year because we lost our sponsor. But we'll do something cool in November, we promise. Haven't figured that quite out yet. I'm going to bring up our guest speaker right now. Jeff is a cannabis activist from Oklahoma. He was diagnosed with COPD about 10 years ago. And I'm going to redo a little reading, Jeff, because you've got quite the resume. 4 years of treatment, he found himself on oxygen on 22 separate medications and on disability. After reaction to a prescribed pharmaceutical, Jeff slipped into a 23-day coma and nearly died. But when Jeff found cannabis oil, everything changed. He now lives here in Colorado. He's a motivational, aspirational speaker. He speaks about cannabis all over the state, all over the country. Please give a warm, warm International Church of Cananbis welcome to Jeff Waters.
Thank you guys. Can you guys hear me all right? First of all, I wanted to thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to be here tonight. It's a pleasure to be able to speak about it. As they have said, I am from Oklahoma originally. Better? Okay, better? Yeah, all right. So I am an activist from Oklahoma. A little background for me. First of all, I just want to make sure I'm at the right place. This is the anti-cannabis church, right? So I say that, but in my experiences a couple of years ago, I helped do a medical marijuana bill in Oklahoma. And as I was standing in the street petitioning for getting a medical marijuana bill on the ballot, an older gentleman came up to me and asked me, that petition is for against medical marijuana, right? So I'm like, can we get any more anti-marijuana in Oklahoma now? So, a true story, it's what's happening in illegal states right now and some of the attitudes we have. But if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be speaking in the International Church of Cananbis in Denver, Colorado today, I would tell you you were insane. You were crazy. My background with cannabis started mainly as a teenager. I used it as a means of getting social acceptance into different groups. When I was very young, I had my first experience with pharmaceutical. I developed an affection, and my mother believes that I lost my hearing. When I was about 5 years old, we found out that I was totally deaf in my left ear and partially deaf in my right. And to this day, my mother still swears it was the antibiotic that did it, even though we did about 5 years of every test you can imagine, and we never could find a reason why it happened. So very young, I had negative experiences with antibiotics. But as a teenager, because of that hearing loss, I used it as a way to gain acceptance into different crowds and the different cliches in high school that we have. And it was pure recreation. And again, I grew up and was born and raised in Oklahoma, in small towns. And so it wasn't the norm. It wasn't traditional. Matter of fact, I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s. And I remember a lot of just say no, but I don't remember any reason why I was supposed to say no at all. But I remember just saying no. As a teenager, again, I used it recreationally. When I got to be an adult, all of my girlfriends and my ex-wives now were all against marijuana, and so it became a hindrance. And so for me, I just used it recreationally. If a friend of mine came by and had some, or whatever, but I didn't really go out and search for it or use it in that type of manner. And I never thought of it as being used for medical purposes at all. In that time, it wasn't trendy and hip to say medical marijuana. I don't know if that term was even used back then. So I wasn't in that experience. So flash forward, I went through high school. Typical high school, like most of you. Raised a little cane, experimented with different things. Had some fun, got into some trouble. I think all of you can relate with most of that. Pretty typical teenage years. And then all the way up until my 30s, I was in pretty good health. I was an athlete in high school. I was actually a wrestler, football player. Actually, I was anything that would get me out of my 6-hour period. But wrestling, football, and baseball were my main loves. And then in my 30s, I was doing journeyman plumbing work. My mid-30s, I was traveling around doing new constructions, and started noticing that I was getting sick with lung congestion a lot. And what would happen I'd go out for a week on the road, and then I would come back, and I'd be sick. I would go to the hospital. I'd get loaded up with antibiotics and steroids and breathing treatments, and then I'd go home, recoup, and go back out on the road Monday. And this was over and over and over and over again. And then finally, at one point, they prescribed me an inhaler in one of those visits. So I started using that. And then I never really, I would use that occasionally when I needed it. And I still didn't have any major health problems. It didn't really slow me down a whole lot. I was still pretty active. And then I came off of the road and went into an office job. I moved from Oklahoma to Texas. And then I started getting sicker with at that point I was diagnosed with COPD actually in the emergency room in Texas. And I went to my primary doctor, and then it became a vicious cycle at that point. But because of the age and generation that I came up in, I believe that the doctors were there to heal and do no harm. Unfortunately, what I learned is I think they've forgotten to heal and do no harm somewhere along the line. But so I trusted my doctors because I came up with that generation. Matter of fact, my doctor, who delivered me, would come over on holidays and exchange gifts and all that good stuff. So I trusted doctors. I believe that was the right way to go. So when I got sick, I went that route. I went to my doctor. I was already on one inhaler. I said, hey, this inhaler's not working so well anymore. So then he throws another inhaler at me. So then I was on 2. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So then I started on with 2 inhalers, and started getting worse, and was out of breath more, and new symptoms and new health issues started popping up as I went along. And each visit that I would go back to the doctor, something new would happen, or something new would come up that they wanted to throw a new pharmaceutical drug at me. So at one point they were throwing high cholesterol, blood pressure medicine, anti-anxiety medicine, depression medicine, which of course I was depressed. You diagnosed me with COPD, which is there was no cure, no known cure for COPD, and eventually terminal disease. So instead of addressing the fact of why I'm depressed, they just threw medicine at me. And that was a vicious cycle, went on and on and on and on. So eventually, next thing I know, and I'm a small guy, I looked down after about 4 years of conventional treatment, of going to the doctors and being on pharmaceutical, and then next thing you know, I believe because of the pharmaceuticals, new health conditions popping up. Had to have my gallbladder, getting high blood pressure, cholesterol, like you name it. My health was all over the place. I was overweight. I was 195 pounds at my biggest. I was on oxygen, and then at one point I was on 22 pharmaceutical medicines, and I was filing disability, and I was living a miserable life. I was only 36 at that point. I was on oxygen. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be able to go from 3 or 4 rows down if I was standing here today trying to talk to you with oxygen on, because that's the length that allowed me to go on oxygen. An oxygen container that wasn't portable. So life was bleak. Life was not good, and I got depressed and was sitting in my home all the time. And back then, different from now, how You guys are more exposed to COPD now ever than what it was when I was diagnosed 10 years ago. We didn't have all these inhaler commercials. We didn't have all the TV, the press about it. And now it's the number 3 killer in the United States. And actually, out of the top 5, it's the only one that's growing. So it should be of concern to everybody in this room, not only because of that statistic, but because it's not just from smoking. A lot of people think it's from smoking. It's definitely not from cannabis smoking. We've learned from studies from the past that it does not cause COPD, does not cause lung cancer. But what you should be alarmed about is the fact that they are not looking for a cure for this disease. They just throw pharmaceutical. They'll tell you honestly and straight up that the best we can do is try to slow the progression of the disease down. And they do a horrible job at that. Horrible job. Because in a matter of 4 years of being diagnosed, I went from being a traveling plumber, working on new constructions, to being confined to oxygen in my home, not able to go out and enjoy life. So that was my route with pharmaceutical. And then it all came to a head. I kept, again, going down the same route. And one of the bad things that we've learned about with COPD is that if you're not staying mobile, you get worse. That's the worst thing you can do with COPD. For those that don't know, COPD is a blanket term. What it describes is anything that is a chronic obstruction of your lungs. So, one of the well-known terms that a lot of people associate with COPD is emphysema, chronic bronchitis. There's many different forms that can fall of that blanket term, that umbrella term. In my particular case, what I had was lung scarring, and I had chronic bronchitis as well. The actual components of my COPD were. I also was diagnosed with, there's actually a gene that causes you can be more susceptible to get COPD with this gene called alpha-1. I was actually diagnosed with that blood test being alpha-1 positive for the gene that causes COPD. And to give you a little background from my family history, all the men from my dad's side, from my father's side, where I get all my genes from, all died of lung cancer or COPD related lung disease, everyone. So I watched them all die of the disease, and I watched a couple of them die since I've gotten well. Because of the outrageous drug laws that a lot of my relatives live under. So what turned me around and turned me into the person that you see today, from the person that was on this shirt before, what happened to me is I was on that path, taking pharmaceutical like candy, believing that it was there to fix me and to make me better, and just following doctor's orders, to be honest with you. And February the 27th, 2013, I woke up and I felt like I had a sinus infection or something going on up in this area. And I didn't think a lot about it. And so I kind of went on my day and kind of dismissed it. Now, again, my day at that time consisted of not much. Working around the house, doing housework and that kind of thing. That's what I was confined to doing. So I ignored it, went on. I think I popped some Benadryl that I had around there. And then went on the next day, and swelling started to come up in my nasal and my facial area. And so at that time we lived in a real rural area of Oklahoma. And we lived in a town in that time called Chakota, Oklahoma. Now, Chakota's claim to fame is Carrie Underwood. That's where Carrie Underwood's from. So she doesn't still live there, but that's where she's from. That's what they claim. So very small town, very rural area. And so we went to the first emergency room to get checked out, and they looked me over and gave me Benadryl and sent me home. and went home the next day, and next night, woke up the next day and started swelling a little bit more, so got a little concerned and went to another emergency room that was within my area there, in that rural area. And this time, they found that I had a lung infection, and gave me more Benadryl, and sent me back home. And so, this was 48 hours. The third day I woke up, and my face was so swollen, it looked like I had gotten beaten by Mike Tyson. And that's a reference to my age right there, but so my eyes were starting to swell shut. And, so then we became, very alarmed, and we drove to the next biggest city, which was approximately an hour and a half away, which was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so when we got there to Tulsa, they pretty quickly figured out what was going on. What was going on is, and this is one of the most important things if you don't hear anything else that I say to you tonight about, hope you understand, you listen to everything, but what caused me to be so sick at that point and put my life in danger was a reaction to a prescription high blood pressure medicine that I've been taking for 3 years prior with absolutely zero issues before, none at all. And this, again, was called a Cinnabar, and it was a 1 in a million reaction, not necessarily allergic reaction, but there's a clinical term for it, and it's way above my level. But they had said at that point that if I waited 24 more hours, that I'd been dead, that I'd been it. So within 24 hours of being in the emergency room and being admitted, at that point, and it was odd. It was very odd from my end because I don't have a lot of memories for that period at the time. One of the things that I do remember, and I don't remember why I said it for sure or anything. I'm very anti-pharma and anti-doctors now, for good cause and good reason. But for then, I don't know that I really had good reason. But I remember telling my ex right before we went into the emergency room, don't let these SOBs kill me. And within 24 hours of being in there, they had me put in a medically induced coma. On top of the reaction I was having to the Cinnabar, I also had pneumonia really bad, staph pneumonia on my lungs, and I didn't know it. I just thought it was my COPD. I was used to alcohol to breathe, and that was just my way of life. And so they had to put me on a ventilator. They put me into the medically induced coma. And then the next thing that happened was my throat started to close up unexpectedly. And from my understanding, at that point there was a good period of time where my oxygen levels dropped really, really low because they were having a hard time getting into an open surgery area to do a trach. And at that point I had a near-death experience in my own right. One of the things that I'm not going to share all the details of that to you because that's not my primary purpose of speaking with you today, but I can tell you that one of the things that did happen to me as I was laying there in that hospital bed, and now I have the records that actually show that during this time frame that this was going on, my chance of survival was 47%. They were already cross-matching my organs for donation. And they just did a blood transfusion on me during this whole time. So a little background, it was a pretty dreary situation. And so I remember being aware that my mother and my ex at the time were in the room with me there. And as I was laying in the bed, I could look out my hospital door, and I saw some black, shadowy figures. Not really shadowy, but more of like in a dark appearance, kind of like a homeless in a dark robe type of fashion. I equate it almost to something you would see from maybe Mardi Gras or something like that. But I got really afraid. The most fear that I ever had, ever. Nothing that ever happened to me on this earth, ever, with that fear of me. At the same time, I remember just knowing that even though that my family was around, it was something that I was going to have to go through myself, and that there was nothing that they could do for me. And I believe I was close to death at that point. And what happened with me at that point is I actually had a guardian angel come and appear to me at that point in the form of an Native American young female in her young 20s. And she laid down on the bed next to me, or in the bed with me, not next to me, and I just felt immediate calm, immediate peace, and so I saw death, and death is very real. I can tell you that for a fact. So we're all going to die, and here's the good thing about it: after we die, something else happens, guys. Well, whatever you want to believe, I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but I'm going to tell you this: something else happens after this life. I have a very interesting story about that, but again, that's not my focus tonight. My focus is mainly on cannabis. But so I came out of that coma. After 23 days, they brought me out of it. It was very interesting. I'll share you a little bit about the coma experience with you, only because I share my story all the time. And 9 times out of 10, somebody will say, "I've never met anybody in a coma that has been in a coma before." And my response is, "Me neither." So, tell me if you know somebody else, swap stories. So, it was interesting in the fact that you revert back to a very primal and almost like a infant stage at different times during this period when I was in this coma. I had to learn to talk again. I had to learn to walk again. And really the weird thing too about it was the time that really sparked changed my way of thinking from believing pharma and trusting pharma was I was laying in the hospital bed, and while I was in the coma, and because of the pneumonia, the reaction to Cinnabar, I got MRSA internally from the hospital. So they put a port straight into my heart, just throwing every antibiotic they could at it to try to save my life. This nurse was coming in, and they were giving me injections for insulin, because with all the antibiotics, it was causing my blood sugar levels to go crazy. And they were just starting to back me out of my coma. And they had to, the way they do that is pretty interesting as well. They can't just pull you out of it when you've been in a coma for that long period of time. They start with the cycling lights back and forth, and then gradually bringing you out for periods of time, readjusting you, and doing everything they can do to try to, I guess, alleviate the trauma from all of it. But I was laying there, and the nurse came in the middle of the night, like I guess in the middle of the night, and to give me an injection. And I don't know how I felt anything at that point, because man, they had me on a lot of drugs. I mean, tons of drugs. While I was in that coma. But I said, "Those SOBs hurt. I wish you would quit giving me those shots." And that nurse said, "Honey, you can quit, you can refuse anything at any time, right?" Wow, that was news to me. I never thought that. I always, because of growing up in that era, and because of trusting doctors, I never once thought to tell a doctor, "No, I don't want that pharmaceutical drug you're pushing," or "No, I don't want that," or "Give me another choice." I somehow got stuck in just going and doing what I was told and following doctor's orders. And so when she told me that, it sparked me. And really from that point forward, I started turning down medications. When I didn't know, when I first came home, I didn't know anything about medical cannabis or cannabis oil or anything at that point. Cannabis didn't save me from the coma. I'll clear that up because there's been people out there that have said in the past that maybe I was trying to say use cannabis or maybe put cannabis in my tubing or something, but no. That point, the whole reason I'm here from that point, I believe is why I'm here today, to be speaking to you today. That's why I made it out of the hospital. But that and a lot of just sheer determination, just focused. I can remember I didn't remember why I was there, or what had happened to me for sure, but I knew I was sick, and I really thought something was wrong with my legs, to be honest with you. And there came a point when they were trying to gauge if it was okay to move me out of. They had different levels of intensive care. They had a critical intensive care, which is where I was, and they had an intensive care, and they had a monitored room, and had a regular station. And so they were asking me questions to see if I knew where I was and what was going on, what happened. And I knew I was in Tulsa. The only reason I knew it was in Tulsa because partially during that time when I was so drugged up, I can remember trying to, in my mind, to escape out of the hospital, and I wanted to leave. I thought, well, I know Tulsa. I can get away. And I thought, well, I won't get very far. I don't have any shoes, and I don't have any clothes, and bad idea. So they were asking me questions, and one of the things they asked me was what hospital I was at, and the hospital name I gave was, I don't know what it was, but where it came from wasn't anything or any hospital I'd ever heard of. And there were several questions like that, the ordinary questions that I couldn't answer. So it was a very tough process. And like I said, I didn't know really what happened. I just knew I was in bad shape. And at that point, all I know now about the experiences and everything that happened to me, I didn't know then. I've had time to process it and understand it a lot better now. So I came home from the hospital, and to be honest with you, when I first got home, I was in bad shape. I didn't understand what had happened to me. I didn't understand why. I was very depressed, suicidal, PTSD. I was afraid to go to sleep. I was afraid to sleep by myself. I was a mess. And I decided that I was going to find either a better way to live or a better way to die, one of the two, because it wasn't working what I was doing before. And so I started researching online, and luckily we live in the day and age now where we can do that. So I started finding a lot of different natural options out there and tried a lot of different things, and then I started seeing cannabis oil pop up. And I wasn't seeing it I couldn't find it for any COPD patients at all. Any stories of anybody that had used it or anything like that successfully. But I did find one lady on Facebook who claimed that she had COPD. I don't know if she really did or not to this day, but she said she did at that time, and said that she'd used cannabis oil to heal her COPD. And I'd read all the stories on cancer patients that had used it. For some of you may know cannabis oil by the term Sapico, full extract cannabis oil, Rick Simpson oil, RSO, Phoenix Tears oil. There's tons of terms for it nowadays. But once I heard about all the stories about the cancer patients, I started thinking, if it's curing cancer, why would it not cure me? I had COPD, and on top of that, what I forgot to mention in there was that I also was diagnosed with a blood disorder called hemochromatosis, which is basically causes your body to produce too much iron and affects every major organ in your body. So there's no treatment for that other than doing a blood draw. Depending on how high your iron levels are, will determine how many times you have to go and have your blood drawn. So neither one of my diseases had an actual cure. But in my mind, cancer was a lot harder to cure, in my mind anyway, than what I had. And so for me, that's all I needed. That sent me on a crazy rampage of researching online, cannabis stories, YouTubing, social media, and then I convinced myself that cannabis oil was the next thing for me to try. Again, I was in Oklahoma, so the next thing I had to do was try to find it. So I asked around, nobody knew what cannabis oil was. Matter of fact, a lot of them probably still don't now, but it's not something that's heard of. And so,
Jeff, what year was this in?
then I started reaching out on social media.
Jeff, hold on. Sorry, I interrupt you for a second. Jeff.
Looking forward through.
I want to ask you a couple of questions to interrupt you for a second because we have to start the movie because we have to close down by 10 o'clock. So I just wanted to ask you, what year was this in when you were discovering cannabis oil?
I started cannabis oil in 2014.
2014, okay.
Yep.
So,
2013, sorry.
2013, and did you feel the effects immediately in regards to your condition? How did you know that this all of a sudden was going to help you?
No, what's up, sir?
Did you feel the benefits immediately? Was it instantaneously?
So I was getting there to that point. So what happened with me with the cannabis oil, when I found somebody who could get it to me, was actually I found somebody online. His name was Rodney Smith. He's since passed on. He lived out here in Colorado at the time. He also was a comedian. Stage name was Roland A. Doobie. And so he actually said, if you're sick and you need cannabis oil, I don't care where you're at, I'll get it to you. So I said, all right, big guy, if you can get it to me in Oklahoma, send it. So the first thing he sent me was just indica oil. Just a full extract cannabis oil made with an indica plant. And that helped me, but it brought me way down and made me real tired. So we started brainstorming, working together. And what we found was sativa strain worked really well for me. The sativa strain did two things for me, and what we went on to find through other patients now over the past 4 years or so, is that sativa strain works well for COPD because it A, gets them thinking about moving and getting up and doing something, and then B, they actually get up and do it. So the key for that is they get up and start moving around, get their lungs moving again, they're not sitting dormant, that start a chain reaction of things. But so when I got the cannabis oil, we got the right strain, I started feeling pretty quickly. Once I found the right dose for me, I felt relief immediately. What we found is, what I've since researched and found, was all the way back in 79, that we knew that THC had bronchodilator effects. So it has the same effects that the peppers have. This is a cannabis inhaler, guys. This is not actually a pharmaceutical.
Awesome.
But this is so the bronchodilator effects is the same thing that the pharmaceutical upgrade has. That opens your lungs up. That's what bronchodilator does. So the combination of the sativa in the oil getting you up and moving around, and the combination of the healing effects from the THC being a bronchodilator. Also the effects of the anti-inflammatory, it also has the antibiotic effects, all of that, the entourage effect of using the whole plant. A lot of days, the popular thing to talk about CBD. I didn't use CBD, I'll tell you right now. I used high THC. Most of the time, the levels would be ranging 70% THC and up, 5% CBD, around that range. And what happened was I had him ship it to me in Oklahoma. And he would ship my cannabis oil to me, and that's all I used for a while. When I started seeing changes, then after about 6 months, I was dropping medicine, and I decided, hey, let's see, I wonder what would happen if I changed my diet. So I didn't do a big radical diet change. All I did is simple. We all know what's good and bad, an apple over a candy bar, or, So I would eliminate some of the things that I knew were bad out of my diet and replace it with fresh fruits and vegetables or fish, and cut back on red meat and minor things that are actually really common sense. And really what I based a lot of what I was doing at that time, my protocol that I was using, because there was no protocol at that time for COPD and lung patients, I was just going as I went. I was just basing on the fact, I started thinking, what did our ancestors do before all this pharmaceutical was out there? they use diet and exercise and natural options. And so that's what I went with. Once I changed my diet, I see more changes. Then after I did that, I thought, okay, let's see what will happen if I start exercising. So now, when I say exercising, I don't mean I was out running around a mile and doing a bunch of crazy stuff. All I simply did to start out with was just simply in my house. Just doing housework. Then I started walking around the neighborhood. And then I walked a little further every day. And a little further every day. Now, mind you again, I was in a small town in Chicago, Oklahoma. By the time I left Chicago, Oklahoma, I could walk from one end of that town to the other end of the town and back with no problems at all. No breathing problems, no health issues, none at all. So I became, once I started getting better through all that process, I started speaking out about it. And really, to be honest with you, I was really naive. I had no idea really what a cannabis activist was. I had no idea what any of it entailed. I didn't really even know what that word was. I don't think I even knew that term. But I felt a moral obligation to my fellow man at that point because this had changed my life. I went from being 190 pounds on oxygen, being told I was going to die with 2 diseases that had no cure and nothing they could do for me other than try to prolong my life and have a better way of life anyway. To dropping all pharmaceuticals, dropping oxygen, losing all the weight, doing everything they said that I couldn't do. Now, let's flash forward a little bit. You know, I think everybody can tell I'm not 190 pounds anymore. I lost all that weight, and now I take no pharmaceutical at all. I don't even take over-the-counter pharmaceutical. I use cannabis for everything, literally everything for me. If I have a headache, cannabis is my go-to. If I have a toothache, it's cannabis soda. So I started speaking out about it, telling people about it, and then mind you, I'm in Oklahoma, in a small town, and then next thing you know, people started hearing about it, and the story started getting out, and a lot of online. I started doing some online interviews, and then we had a petition drive in Oklahoma for medical marijuana come up, and a group was doing it, and they failed. First of all, Oklahoma is the hardest petition state in the United States. You have 90 days to get the amount of signatures you need, and it's crazy. So they failed. So they were supposed to do a second petition drive, had all these patients behind it. I was even behind it. What that looks like, I would go around town and people would be going, "Where's the petition at? Where can I go sign a petition?" I was like, "We'll have it on this day, March 12th, whatever it was." And then that day came and they pulled out on us. And so at that point, several patients in Oklahoma called and asked me to get involved with the medical marijuana movement in Oklahoma. So there was already a group formed called Green the Boat who mainly helped out with the petition drive at concert events and things where younger people were at, getting signatures there, registering people to vote there, and things of that manner. So what's kind of a funny coincidence, on that night they were having a meeting and they were doing a premier spring culture high that we had up here earlier. So they asked me to come, and I spoke with one of the other guys on the phone, kind of laid out a little plan. I was like, "Hey, look, we can run a petition drive." "You're crazy, man. There's no way we can't. You know, we only got about 2 weeks to put it together." "We can do it, man. We can do it." So even the moment when we got to that meeting, and I'm standing up and introducing myself to everybody, he's still back there, been calling about whether we're going to do a petition drive or not. So I ended up getting involved with him. We did a petition drive in Oklahoma for medical marijuana. We had 90 days, we needed 128,000 signatures. We did this on a budget of easily under $15,000, private donations that I got from my own private donors outside of Oklahoma. And then we had a handful of actually volunteers. What we found was we had a website. We had an awesome link. Click here to volunteer. Thousands of people clicked on that link and would submit their information with their email, their phone number, or whatnot on there, and say they wanted to help out. Nobody was showing up. We even got to the point where we started calling them on the list and emailing them, and they still wouldn't show up. So it was basically maybe scattered around Oklahoma, 40 or 50 actual people that we could count on that would be on the streets getting signatures. So during the middle of that petition drive, I actually had a heart attack as I was standing in the 102-degree heat in Oklahoma and 98% humidity trying to get signatures for the petition drive. So, but we weren't successful on it. So I went on my way. We continued to educate people in Oklahoma. I was speaking out. I was traveling at that point. Word had gotten out. I got kind of following on social media and such. And so I'd been to, what's funny about tonight is this is the first time I spoke to a group of people who's actually all for cannabis. Because usually where I speak is either people in a legal state where they're either for or against. And it's usually a hot topic, issue wherever you're at. Because whenever I was doing it, fighting for it in Oklahoma, I actually had death threats and everything come at me. So it's crazy issue.
Jeff, we're going to need you to wrap it up 2-3 more minutes, and then we're going to have to start the movie soon. What kind of advice would you give people as far as self-dosing and finding the right strain for them? Because you have a very serious condition. So actually finding the right strains and how to dose yourself is something that I think is a nugget of wisdom everybody can come away with. How would you recommend people go on that journey of finding the right strain, the right percentage of THC, CBD for their ailment?
Well, if you're fighting a major disease, when I say a major disease, cancer, COPD, something major, it's in essence, MS, even epilepsy, I can put that up as a major disease. If you're fighting that, in most of those cases, an exception, I'll put the epilepsy on, most of those cases you're going to need high THC. You need a high THC. Now, generally on cancer patients, for the most part, they treat people with a oil made from indigo oil generally. That's generally the thought process out in the community. However, what I've learned through all these years is that it's a lot of, unfortunately, what we're trying to learn out here is learning that dosing and the right things. And we've got people out here that are trying to do that. I'm actually part of a study right now, that's a vape pen study where it monitors your dose where you can see exactly how many milligrams of THC or CBD or whatever you're getting, so you do about over each time, the next time you're going to do that dose. But really it's throwing it up here on the wall and see what sticks a lot of times. Now with COPD patients, what we found is really a sativa strain, blue dream seems to work really well for COPD patients. But over that time frame now that I've been speaking out and doing this, I've helped thousands of patients. And for you all listening to this story, wow, it's unusual, it's unique, it's a crazy story, but I see people every day now that get healed of diseases that said they're not being able to be healed and living life again. And so, from what can we do going forward? And what I do and what I simply do is just try to share my message with everybody that, pharmaceutical, government, that all want to crack up to be, take your health back into your own hands. Don't trust or believe everything. And my belief is everywhere, everybody should have the option of cannabis. Just like everything else. Like I did a posting the other day on social media that as a cannabis patient, for me, what I've learned is that people think now that I'm Superman, and I'm never get sick anymore, because I use cannabis, and that's not the case. We're still not almost to get sick. We just choose to use cannabis as a better option than the pharmaceutical. And so that's what my fight is. That's what I come here to do. That's what I go around the United States to do, is share my message. And hopefully to touch somebody's lives and hopefully help some people along the line and fight for legalization across the United States. And I appreciate that you guys have me here today. And it's been wonderful.
Thank you, We hope you come back. If anybody has any questions for Jeff, we're going to not do a Q&A this time because we don't have enough time to get the movie playing before 10 o'clock. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to him. He's totally willing to give you his contact information, and we hope to have him again sometime soon. All right, so we're about to show a movie called The Culture High. I'll give you a little story about how we're screening this. I was on a cannabis panel at Sundance Film Festival 3 years ago with the producer of this movie. His name is Adam Scorgi. He's a Canadian. He's famous for the movie The Union, The Business of Getting High. Many of you guys have seen that one. He's friends with Joe Rogan and Snoop and all these guys. So when he asked Richard Branson's in his movies, when he asks people to do his movies, everyone says yes. He has a new movie on Netflix called Ice Guardians. It's all about enforcers in the NHL whose only job it is to fight other enforcers. It's absolutely crazy, but this is one of my favorite of his films right here. It's called The Culture High. We have popcorn downstairs if anybody wants to grab popcorn. We still have snacks, etc. Please clean up around yourself. Don't drop the ash if you can. Don't get too high, whatever. Enjoy the movie, guys.
Steve, check the volume. It might be too loud. So like, as I play it, it might go like, ah! Yeehaw! Flip those lights.